Good morning. I'm Jim Roselle.
And I'm Russ Diethrick.
And welcome to the Times of Your Life. Each Saturday morning, following the Saturday breakfast party, it's time for the adventures of people's lives on the Times of Your Life. And Russ Diethrick, good morning.
Good morning to you, Jim Roselle.
What an adventure we have this morning in the studio.
We certainly do.
What an adventure he's had, and he's only 22 years old. He's done more adventuring in that young age, Russ. You and I would have to combine our adventures to meet what this young man has
we
done.
Still come up short.
We're delighted, pleased, and very happy that he accepted an invitation to share that life that he's had. Brent Peterson, good morning.
Good morning, sir. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you, Brent. I hope I was right in saying that at the age of 22, have you personally thought how adventurous your life has been?
Yeah, it's often fun to reflect on. I've been very fortunate to see many corners of the world already by this age.
Brent, do you keep a library or a log?
I do. I try and keep some kind of journal while I'm traveling, but a lot of it's just through photographs. But, you know, eventually it all comes down just to memories and what you can take back from each journey.
Well, let us identify you a little bit stronger here on the broadcast.
Of course.
You're the son, of course, of Mr. and Mrs. Greg Peterson.
Exactly.
And your dad obviously has had an adventure, many great adventures.
Oh, of course.
And he's so historically minded and so involved with the history of this community and, of course, of the Robert Jackson Center. And he's done everything possible to bring the very best to our great institution there, and continues to do so. What impact did he have on your life?
Well, my dad never wastes any opportunity. Wherever we're traveling, there's usually never any time for relaxing or anything like that, but there's always time to see another castle, another museum, just to get a historical context. Just, you know, as he says, just to understand, get a flavor of the local culture. And it's always fun. It's funny the things you learn and you take them back, and you know, only later when you're thinking back on the trip, you're like, wow, yeah.
I thought he'd have followed you around the world with this camera.
You'd think. The camera, it seems, is glued to his hand. It's always with him.
Well, let me give you more background here on this young man. Brent Peterson is 22 years of age. He was born in Jamestown.
Yes, sir. Born and raised.
You were a graduate of Southwestern High School.
Exactly.
What year was that?
2003, that would have been.
2003. That's only 4 years ago.
Exactly. I just graduated from college earlier this year.
Kenyon College.
Exactly.
What did you take up, Brent?
Well, while I was at Kenyon, I focused my energies on being an international studies major, and so that focused primarily on West Africa, and then also on economics as well. So a bunch of different things.
What can that develop as a career for you?
You know, there's a lot of things that I'd be interested in doing. I think diplomacy is really fascinating as well. But I also think there's a lot of things that can be done. As far as what really interests me is international trade. I think a lot of countries, they kind of get a bad deal, if you will, as far as international trade goes. So I think there's a lot that can be done to change the terms of trade. But there's a lot of things you could do, you know, international humanitarian work. It's really whatever interests you.
Well, I think you have, you're a diplomat in your blood. That comes from your mother living with your father.
Precisely. I've learned well. I've learned from the best.
Well, your mom's name is?
Cynthia Peterson.
And did Dad graduate from Kenyon?
No, my father and mother both graduated from Allegheny College in Meadville, Pennsylvania. That's where they met. No, he did not graduate from Kenyon.
Why did you choose Kenyon?
Well, I like to say I chose it on my own, you know, for its well-known academics, things like that. But to be truthful, my sister went to Kenyon as well. So I looked at a lot of colleges, maybe almost 30, because, you know, that's my mother's thing. But in the end, it just came with what works. And I love Ohio. You know, I visited one day in the fall, really autumnal, the beautiful leaves, and sold me, you know.
Brent, you mentioned your sisters. What are they doing?
Well, I have two sisters, and my oldest sister right now is currently living in Detroit, and she's working for the Detroit Tigers as a director of community relations for the Tigers Foundation.
Is she familiar with Dan Lunetta?
Yes, they have met a couple times, exactly, because they are working for the same organization. So it's interesting. Sometimes they do get together and, you know, talk Tigers.
And her name is?
Amy Peterson.
Okay.
and she graduated from Jamestown High School. And then my other sister, Megan, is currently in her last year of law school out in Cooley School of Law in East Lansing, Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you know, there are so many career choices for you, Brent.
Certainly there are. I've been very fortunate
and,
to have these opportunities.
for it to narrow down to international studies and a focus on economics, where along the way did that fascination come from?
Well, you know, as I'll say again, I've been very fortunate, and you know, my family has done a lot of traveling. You know, every Easter vacation we try and travel somewhere, and a lot of times it was an international destination. So it's all about just getting an appreciation for different cultures. I've been very fortunate to see the different contexts in which so many of the people of the world live. And as far as economics is concerned, I think economics is something that, well, hey, money makes the world go round. It's the truth to the times we live in. But you know, when you look around and you know, there's all these problems that seem very perennial. They can never go away. And so, as far as, you know, African countries are concerned, I just get tired of seeing the same thing, a cycle of poverty. And I really do honestly believe that humans are clever, and you know, we could get through this. I just don't think we've tried hard enough yet.
But if you have a checkoff list, what are some of the places you've been?
I've been very fortunate to travel very extensively throughout Europe with my family. Done a lot of Ireland, England, Scotland, Spain, Sweden, Italy, Germany, Austria. But also we've done jaunts to Egypt. But probably my favorite, the favorite voyages I've been able to take was during my junior year. I studied abroad for the entire year, spending a semester in Senegal in West Africa and India after that.
What about the young people of those nations, Brent?
You know, they're just like me. They really are. And it's funny how sometimes these concepts can be built that, you know, they're foreigners and they're different from us. But they're really not. And once you get down to it, you know, you get down to the most basic level, they want the same things I want. They want happiness, you know. They want a steady job. They want good prospects for their future. And it's frustrating because in, you know, a country like Senegal, it's, you know, when you read in the news about boats of migrants arriving in the Canary Islands, all of those boats leave from Senegal. And it's an incredibly dangerous journey, but that shows the price that they're willing to risk, you know, to have an opportunity to go to Europe, as they see it, as the only place to really have a future, to get a good paying job, to be able to support your family. And so I felt a lot of solidarity with them, not in any way that they face the same struggles as I do. I'm incredibly fortunate. You know, it's great to be here with you guys, and you know, this is a rare opportunity. But I think at the end of the day, we're all pretty much the same. We all have the same drives.
But what support do they get from the leadership of their countries, the young people?
You know, it's frustrating. I don't want to say they get none, but it's a question of limited resources, and you know, a lot of there's not money to go around for scholarships and things like that, and you know, oftentimes just even the most basic levels of school are too expensive. So the resources that they often have access to are very, very limited. Sometimes none.
Did you stay with a family?
Yes, sir. In both countries, I was fortunate enough to have 2 homestays. So it was a great taste, just getting to know the local culture, getting to know the local language. Just everything from, you know, small things like listening to the radio, you know, programs like this in other countries, you know, getting a flavor for the local just way of life, and also just watching the news, but being able to discuss day-to-day problems. You know, it's, you know, as a child thinking back just on conversations around the dining room table, you know, and that's really when families come together and connect, and you get to know more about each other. And I think that's what I cherish the most with living with a family, is being able to sit down to dinner and you know, talk about everyone's day.
Your grandfather Peterson and grandmother were great for that conversation, weren't they?
Oh, great for that conversation. Yes, of course. Without a doubt. That's where we get our conversational abilities. They could talk about anything forever.
Have you mastered any of the languages that you've visited?
You know, the only language I could say that I don't even know if I could say mastered, but I have a very comfortable command of French, which is what I spoke mostly in Senegal. It was a former French colony, and nobody there speaks English. And so when I got there, my French was pretty rudimentary, but over the course of 2 months, it got very, very good because no other option. It's either that or silence. But besides that, the local language in Senegal, Wolof, it's really difficult, and I tried, but it didn't really stick. But in India, I really tried really very hard to learn Hindi, and it stuck. And I'm still trying to work on it, but it's a very difficult language. It's very different. It's very tonal, different structure. But just a little bit right now. I'll let you know when I get more.
What locations in India were you?
In India, I was in the state of Rajasthan, in the city of Jaipur, which is about 6 hours to the southwest of Delhi. So it's very much in northern India. India is a very, very big country, and I was just in the north central part, I guess you could say.
But in all your travels, did you ever feel or get the sense from where you were visiting that you were the ugly American?
Oh, for sure. That's one thing I became very comfortable with during my time abroad was, when you walk into a room in Senegal, hey, you're the only white guy around, and people notice you, and it's much the same in India. Americans kind of stick out. So certainly, I did get that sense that all eyes were on me when I'd walk into a place. And so it forced me to reflect on my actions. I wanted to present a good image of Americans. I didn't want to do anything that was intolerant or, culturally impolite.
I'm sorry.
No, please go on.
What concept did they have of America?
It's funny. They get a really bad concept of Americans, and it's really frustrating. Only because what they think of America, and oftentimes American women, is just what they see in movies. And so they have this concept that, America's just this, anything goes, free love society, we're all just crazy and we have fun and drive big cars and have great lives. So it's important to, not be too ostentatious in your consumption in those countries, just keep a low profile for no other reason than you don't want to be that ugly, consuming American who, just doesn't have any respect for local culture and, just
well, how did you try to explain to them, Brent, about the fact that even in America, as rich as you think it is,
right,
we have areas of poverty and we have people that economically work hard every week and try to make ends meet. How did you try to explain that side of America?
Well, it's different explaining that, it's a concept of relativity. And, they talk about how they would love to go to America and they love to get any kind of job there, just so they could send the money home. And it's difficult, telling them that, just the average job in America, you might be making like $15,000, $20,000 a year. And that is an astounding sum. It's a lot of money to them when they only make maybe a couple hundred, maybe $500 a year. So along those lines, it's important to just stress, that wealth is relative, and the cost of living in America is so high, and there's a complete lack of public transportation. So when you want to get anywhere in America, you've got to have your own car, and that's expensive as well. And food and everything is more expensive. So it's just trying to get that across that yes, it's more money, but a lot of people can't make ends meet.
Brent, did you ever feel unsafe? And the buzzword now is terrorism. Do you ever have any sense of that in the visits?
I didn't. There's always some kind of spots you can get in, especially in a city you're not familiar with, where.
Well, that's even Chautauqua County.
Right. Yeah. It's might be a little bit too late at night, and you're in a dark alley, and you're just kind of like, okay, maybe this isn't probably the best idea. But a lot of people asked me that before I went to Senegal, because Senegal is it's 85% Muslim country, and so many people were worried that there might be fundamentalists there or religious radicals, and it was actually quite the opposite of that. And I've never felt safer than when I was in Senegal. The people were just so down to earth and so nice. And on top of that, it's an incredibly tolerant society. And, as I said, it's a majority Muslim country with a small Catholic minority. And then, there's some other smaller groups that are maybe animist. But, no, I mean, it's just a country of religious and cultural diversity. They've got 15 national languages in a country the size of, South Dakota?
Wow. Exactly.
And so many different ethnic groups. And that was another actually fantastic thing to learn just about tolerance is, some people, when they hear about, conflicts, I mean, it's often in the context of conflicts in Africa, these ethnic groups that are fighting. And one day I asked the ignorant question, what's the difference? They're ethnic groups. And someone was like, well, what's the difference between a German and an Italian? What's the difference between, a Swede and an English person? And it sounds really naive, I guess, now in retrospect, but yeah, that is the difference, And, Senegal is an incredibly diverse country for how small it is. And so when you factor in that cultural diversity and that religious diversity, incredibly peaceful country, and as I said, there's a few countries I felt more safe than in Senegal.
What was the most modern part of your stay, or that particular city? How modern were they, from our standards?
Right. Well, Dakar, the capital of Senegal, is a cosmopolitan city like any other I've been to. Regular, paved streets, tall buildings, glass and concrete structures. It's the home of the West African Central Bank. Beautiful presidential mansion. It's a really developed city. They've got everything from arts and entertainment, jazz clubs. A lot of different things going on. But, going to India, Delhi is such an amazing city. It's so huge, but also it's so modern, and there's so much change happening in Delhi right now, and in India in general. The same could be said for the large city on the west coast, Mumbai, or what used to be called Bombay. But for example, New Delhi has a new subway system that is brand new. They're still putting the finishing touches on it, and it's going to be completely operational, I think, if not already, very soon. But it's the nicest subway I've ever been on. And I've had the good fortune of riding metro systems throughout the world. And I was just in Boston this past week, and Boston's system seems pathetic and antiquated. Honestly, Delhi has the most high-tech, smooth, efficient subway system that I've ever had the pleasure of riding on. It's absolutely amazing. And so what many people, India and Delhi is a byword for many people for just old and past and things that are inefficient, but no, it's changing rapidly, and these cities are definitely on the move.
Brent, how self-sufficient are these countries? Is everything made in America or made in China? Or?
It's different, of course. In India, India followed for a long time throughout the 70s and 80s, more of a Soviet-style centralized planned economy. So along those lines, they've always focused on making things domestically, and there's always been a huge tariff on foreign goods. So in India, most things you'll buy are made in India because they do make an effort to support the indigenous industries, indigenous production. And it seems to work for them, although they've liberalized a bit more since the early 1990s, and so a lot more goods are coming in from abroad. In Senegal, it's much a different story in that it's a very small country with very limited resources. And sometimes traditional economic trading relationships still exist, and in this case, Senegal still has very much a large commercial trade with France. A lot of their products come in from France still, but a lot of their, we live in an increasingly small world, and so every day ships come in bringing rice from Asia, things like that. So some things are made in Senegal, but I'd say most things are brought in, unfortunately.
This is the times of your life. Saturday mornings on News Talk 1240 WJTN Radio. Our guest is Brent Peterson of Southwestern, graduate of Kenyon College, who's had these fabulous experiences. And I keep going back, he's only 22, folks.
Very fortunate, yes.
I can't imagine what the next 22 years will do with you, Brent.
I hope they're half as much fun.
Okay. We're going to pause for this message, and we'll be right back. I don't know if you're aware of that, Brent, but that's the Song of India.
Really?
That's by Tommy Dorsey, the big band, many years ago.
Excellent. I did
The
not know
Song
that.
of India. We thought it was a fitting musical
completely
moment here
appropriate,
on the times of your life.
Certainly.
Brent Peterson, a graduate of Kenyon College, Southwestern High School, who already holds a degree in international studies with a focus on Africa and economics, and we've certainly talked about Senegal. The question Russ, go ahead. Maybe you had one ready to pose, but I wanted to identify the song.
Well, I was just going to ask you, other than your studies and your travels, what other hobbies do you have? I thought you were going to be a world-class bicyclist, and you put that in the garage, I guess. But what are some of your other hobbies?
Yes, unfortunately, having gone away to school, it forced me to, hang up the bike only because it takes a lot of time. Yes, I loved racing mountain bikes when I was a teenager. And,
well, you were very proficient at it.
Yeah, I was put a lot of time into it. It's basically all I ever did. No, and so I really do miss my bike, and I still love to get out for a ride. Bikes are just an amazing invention and so good for you.
Would you like to meet Lance Armstrong?
I'd love to, yeah. I think that'd be great.
What would you ask Lance Armstrong?
How'd you do it? I mean, the Tour de France is such an amazing undertaking. They go thousands of miles over the course of a month, and it's really amazing to consider. It's an incredible feat for a human to accomplish.
Well, with what you've experienced in that field, you then know what he's accomplished.
Right.
And it really boggles your mind.
Oh, it's absolutely mind-boggling, yeah. It really is. It's incredible. But yeah, since I've given up biking, I do fill a lot of my time. Sometimes my family bemoans this hobby, but I love playing guitar, and I play it all around the house, and I've been trying to play with friends a lot recently. I've got this pipe dream of putting together an album someday, but it's a really slow process, and writing a song is a very involved process. But I'm working on it slowly but surely. Besides that, I just love following the news, and considering that I just graduated recently, actually probably my full-time hobby right now is applying for jobs. Mom and Dad are only happy to have me around for so long.
They're probably chuckling right now.
I hope so. Love you guys.
But Brent, with the possibilities of future employment, where would you like to really wind up at this particular time?
That's a great question. I would love to wind up with any company that would have me. Any organization, if you're listening, please, I need a job. I don't know. There's so many things that I'd love to get involved in. I really do think, one organization that I would love to work for is involved with bringing internet access to rural areas in developing countries. And that was one thing that I really took away from my time abroad, was that you sometimes take for granted things like the internet. And, it's such a recent phenomenon, and sometimes it can even bewilder me, as a member of the younger generation. But, people get it, and people get what an amazing resource it is. And in both countries I was in Senegal and in India, there is cyber cafes everywhere, on every street corner in the cities. And, the youth, they understand it. They understand technology, and they want to embrace it, and they want exposure to it. And so I really do feel that a big part of that could be just, getting people more exposure and having, the internet as just a resource for school children in these countries. Just think about, any information you get just by using Google or any kind of search engine. It's really incredible. I know any college student maybe listening would be able to, sympathize with the fact that when you need to do some research, you don't go to the library and pick out books. Come on. You just type it in, and then, the information comes up. And it's much easier today. And I think it's a huge resource, and I would love to get involved in bringing that to more people.
Would you say the world's getting more flat every day?
Yes, I would have to agree with, Thomas Friedman's concept of this world getting more flat. It's completely true. A lot of companies now, a company I was just talking with, they've got a staff of 4 people in America, and they're founded in America, and they do work on bringing internet to rural areas, but they've got 27 people working for them in India. Wow. Just taking care of their back office stuff. And again, it's things like the internet. It's I don't feel like I'm saying anything new here, but it's things like the internet that cuts down those barriers, that makes communication easier, that does allow people halfway across the world to compete just as effectively with me as a job candidate. And I find that frustrating sometimes, but it just means I've got to hustle a bit more, I guess.
Let me go back to your visits with families.
Right.
Do you correspond with them today?
I do. Unfortunately, not as much as I'd like to. But, it's funny that it's, again, with the internet, it's amazingly simple to do. And every now and then, maybe every month or so, I'll get an email or I'll send an email to my host brother and also some of my coworkers from Senegal. And, there's this, a lot of networking sites online now, and I also keep in touch with my host brother from India through that.
What's his name?
His name is Ayushman Singh, and he's, I believe he just studied his degree actually in, I believe it's, I want to say merchant marines, but working on being an engineer for large mechanical systems on
What's his
ships.
dream? What's his dream, Brent?
Well, he ideally he went to school to be an engineer, and India has some of the best engineering schools in the world. And he was fortunate enough to go to a naval engineering school. And I think for a while he'd like to work on a large ship. Usually jobs like that are involved in being on container ships, sailing the ocean's waters, bringing the goods that Americans love so much from other countries. But I think in the end, what he's really interested in is getting involved with automotive design, because the automotive industry in India is blowing up right now, and there's a lot of opportunities for it. So I think that's something he'd like to do. The last time I spoke with him, that was his interest.
Around the world, there's more automobiles and less bicycles every day.
Exactly.
What about global warming in those countries, Brent? Was there any concern over that?
There is a lot of concern, in those countries, but also in developing countries in general over global warming, and it's very frustrating because while they might not have been so much the cause of it, the industrial sectors of their economies are still relatively underdeveloped as compared to other countries, maybe ours. But along those lines, they're still going to have to deal with the consequences with it. And, Senegal is a coastal country, and so they're going to have to deal with the rising tide. They're going to have to deal with increasing desertification. Senegal is mostly desert, and it will only get worse. It'll make growing crops harder to grow. Same in India. They're having a hard time keeping up their water tables in, what is considered to them to be, the grain belt of India. Water tables are dropping without being replenished. And they're having a really hard time keeping soil quality up. And it's just a question of, even if we can't stop that trend from happening, the resources aren't there to abate it. Whereas in America, we might be able to better adapt to those changes. Those countries lack those resources. So,
India was a topic for 1 week at Chautauqua this summer.
Right.
And it's interesting you mentioned, because in the interviews that I had the pleasure of doing with some of the folks up on the lecture platform, water was a big subject about India.
Exactly, and
that was a great concern. It's a real challenge.
It really is a real challenge, and I like to think that hopefully through technology we could some kind of answer that problem, or at least come up with a more efficient use of that resource. But it's difficult because it's really a question of balancing two heavily competing desires and two heavily competing needs, in that India for a long time was a country that was reliant on food imports. They didn't raise enough food within their borders for their own population. But since the Green Revolution occurred, since I forget what organization founded that, but it was just an ability to make seeds more efficient, intensive agriculture, using fertilizers and pesticides. India now is a gross exporter of foodstuffs. And so, you've got the fact that it's got a very strong agricultural sector, and many people are employed in that, and it supports a large part of their economy and also makes them autonomous, gives them a greater deal of autonomy. As far as food supplies are concerned, it comes at a considerable environmental cost. And so, it's really two competing demands, and it's hard to say which is more important, and how do you resolve that?
Our Times of Your Life with a young man named Brent Peterson, graduate of Kenyon College, a degree in international studies, and a focus on Africa and economics, and of course studied abroad also in India. Back with his great adventure on the Times of Your Life after this. A little more touch of the Song of India, I just thought.
Very nice
appropriate.
Touch. Yeah.
So, Russ Diethrick.
Now, you talked about some of the jazz clubs. What kind of music were they playing?
Oh, man. Well, I think that would pertain mostly to Senegal, and the music in Senegal is really second to none. Oh man, I can't say enough about it. You know, the Senegalese have this musical style called mbala, and it's really heavily reliant on djembe, or I guess what we would just call like bongo drums, but such complex rhythms, and really the musical structure of that music is incredible. And so just being able to go to clubs, and they mix everything. You know, there's also another band from Senegal called the Baobab, the Orchestra Baobab, and really it's really cool to see where the origins of music, like, you know, that we hear on maybe the Buena Vista Social Club, you know, Afro-Caribbean music, and what does that term really mean. And really you go to these clubs, and it sounds almost as if you're just right off the streets of Cuba, you know, as you know, the music that we feel, you know, comes from Cuba.
Did you ever sit in with them?
I never played with them. No, I tried playing with a couple groups, but I was humbled by their talent, and I just put my guitar down and decided it'd be better if I just watched.
Which guitarist would you like to meet?
Oh man, well, a Senegalese guitarist or American guitarist?
Any guitarist.
You know, I'd have to give a shout out to the guitarist I did meet. He was a young man of my age. It's called Hassan Sek, and he played for a band called Faloudien. And this kid, he just blew me out of the water. You know, I've tried to teach myself guitar, but then, you know, I've had the good fortune of having lessons and, you know, my parents' support. But this kid, honestly, I really don't think he had a day of lessons in his life, and he was just the most fantastic guitar player I'd ever witnessed. And, you know, I'd bring over music that I liked, and we'd listen to it together. And, you know, he would just be listening to a song, and, you know, he'd hear a guitar solo from one of my CDs that he really liked, and he'd stop it, he'd pause it, rewind it, and he'd make a copy of it on a tape. And then I'd come by, you know, a couple days later to hang out with him, and he'd have like the whole guitar solo mastered, right down to the most intricate details. So talented, really humbling.
Brent, when you begin to travel on these world tours by yourself, without family, what was it like the first time you stepped off a plane?
Really intimidating. But you just got to trust yourself. You know, in situations like that where you're just by yourself, you got to realize that, you know, just take a step back. If you're feeling a bit intimidated, you know, if you're feeling a bit overwhelmed being in a foreign country, just take a step back and realize, you know, I think it's important to focus always on what an opportunity that you're being presented with, and just making the best out of it really is how I like to go into it. Whenever I'm feeling frustrated, or, you know, I feel like I'm not getting the culture at all and I'm not being understood, and what am I doing here? I don't belong. You just got to think about what an opportunity it is, and, you know, hey, things could be worse. And so, you know, people aren't understanding you when your accent is pretty poor. Just, you know, suck it up, and it's you know, it's survival. I mean, you can't just, you know, curl up in a ball at the airport, and you find eventually once you let down your guard, people will let down their guard, and you meet people, and they'll treat you just like anyone else.
Let me take you back to your high school days, Brent.
Of course.
Was there a teacher or two, a history teacher, or wherever that just sort of impacted your like for history and for whatever you now desire to do?
Oh, certainly. I think a large part of my interest in international studies, I would have to thank my French teacher, Christine Borman. I hated French with a passion. Hated it. I really did for the longest time. But she was able to just get through to me in a way that no other teacher had, and she really gave me an appreciation for the language, made me love it, and made me want to learn it. And really, it's because of her that I've been able to profit so much from my travels by being able to speak another language fluently. And certainly, another person who's been a huge influence on my life, I would have to say, is a history teacher I had, Sarah Horgan. She just was really great, and just forcing us to consider the news that we read every day and news we heard, and just you know, try and go a little bit deeper for analysis and see, you know, what's motivating anyone from businessmen to politicians, and, you know, take you know, not take everything with a grain of salt, I guess was her big lesson.
Brent, you're talking about the news. Does the American television or the American broadcast dominate in these countries, or?
It does. It's really incredible. CNN you can get probably anywhere you go, and CNN's a really well-respected source for news. But at the same time, in these countries, they are also very skeptical of American news sources. And as oftentimes we might imagine that CNN's a news source, and it's probably unbiased and balanced. Many people don't perceive that, and you could say that their arguments for believing so might be justified. But American media is pretty pervasive throughout the world. But at the same time, there's often equally as good, if not better, local outlets. Where you can get the news and get a local flavor for the news and their perspective, which I think is most important on news that's happening throughout the world.
I'd have to ask this as a follow-up to the fact that you certainly admire the teachers that you just talked about. But your dad obviously has kept you historically minded, too, from the work he's done and
right.
From the people he's associated with and the wonderful work he's done contacting all people who were involved in the Nuremberg trial or other historical times and to bring him here.
Right.
You had to profit from that, I would say.
Oh, absolutely. It's my father's involvement with the Robert H. Jackson Center has been of huge benefit to me. Just in again as an interest in international affairs and an interest in as I guess in that case would be international justice, but I think the events that he brings in, and I love getting involved with them, and oftentimes people comment, oh wow, what a great opportunity to be involved in that, and it's easy to lose sight when it's your father who's organizing them. That's all I could say is because when these events become on, I don't have any choice but to be a chauffeur and an entertainer. But certainly, and he really does bring some amazing events, and it's really put Jamestown on the map. I'm very, very proud of what he's done, because a lot of people come to Jamestown and they say, well, it's kind of a small town, but really impressive stuff you've got going on here. So, yeah.
What's the next stamp you want to put on your passport?
The next stamp I'd like to put on my passport. It's a big world out there, but it's difficult because as much as I love traveling, just on our conversation earlier with global warming, it's hard to, be conscientious and be someone who's concerned with global warming and what the world is going to be like for my kids. I don't want us all just be sunburned all the time. And it's hard because I want to see the world, and it does interest me, and I want other people to see the world because I feel like that cultural exchange is visiting any other country, even if it's Canada. Is really an important part of getting to understand other people and just understanding other people in their daily lives. But at the same time, it's hard to do that. I don't want to say responsibly. I don't want to sound too high and mighty, but international travel is it's a really carbon-intensive thing, and if we're really worried about abating global warming, it's really caused me to think twice about traveling abroad and maybe finding a more efficient way to do it. But it takes an awful long time to get across the ocean on a boat, so I don't know. I'm gonna reserve my next travel destination so I can find hopefully a better way of getting there, because we've got to find another way to travel. That's
the internet might well be that.
Exactly, and you can do a lot of things just by communicating with people over the internet. Maybe you don't even have to travel.
Yeah, time for a pause on the times of your life here on Saturday mornings on News Talk 1240 WJTN Radio. In case you've just joined us, we have a young man named Brent Peterson, 22 years of age, born in Jamestown, went to Southwestern High, and then attended Kenyon College. And just think of what he's already witnessed as far as the world is concerned. Wow. Here I go with that wonderful word that tries to put everything in place, It is a wow sort of thing. It really is.
It really is when you think about it.
What you have done so far, what experiences you've had.